On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, I would like to use the situation with the Bitcoin Cash split to kind of teach you something about decentralization in the blockchain space. Then I would like to move on to talking about how Dash is on the brink of a long-awaited transformation, which will include human-readable account names. Then I'd like to move on to talk about, as requested by you dear viewers, an update on the Worbli share drop situation. Then I'd like to move on to talking about Japan's biggest bank is going to use Ripple to connect with Brazil. And finally, I'd like to talk about EOS is working as designed, but critics are not happy about it. So timestamps for all of that are down in the video description if you want to skip ahead. If you're new around here and you want to get rid of the ads, support this show, and earn cryptocurrency rewards, you need to check out the website, which is thecryptoverse.show. Then click on that big blue button that says Get Paid to Watch, and it will explain how you can get rid of the ads, how you can support the show, and earn cryptocurrency rewards every day. So go get that. Meanwhile, we'll get into the video. So this first story, there is something to learn about decentralization from the Bitcoin Cash situation. So we've talked about the Bitcoin Cash situation, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm only going to use it as the example to illustrate the concept of decentralization and how it works. So first of all, we'll go over to Poloniex. And what we're going to do is we're going to add up the different prices of the futures. So you know Poloniex is already trading the two variants of Bitcoin Cash before it's even split. So right now, Bitcoin SV is $116. If we add that to the price of Bitcoin ABC, which is $420, you get $536. However, Bitcoin Cash itself, the real coin that exists right now, is trading $4 less than that at $532. So that's the first thing that we've learned right now, is that the combined value of the two split coins, which are actually futures, they're worth $6 more than the predecessor. So that's number one. Now, this next thing we're going to go do is head over to CoinDance for some data. So CoinDance is a great site for blockchain-based data. Make sure you're on the Bitcoin Cash version of the site by clicking the button in the top right. If you want to go to coin.dance, and you'll get the same info as I've got right here. So what we see here, we've got the four versions of the Bitcoin Cash software. And underneath each one, we have three measurements of support. We have hash rate, nodes, and company support. Now, it's one thing to teach concepts of decentralization kind of in an abstract or an academic way, but what we have here is a real-world example of it playing out. So we have these three groups: miners, nodes, and companies. So that's decentralization right there. Three groups of stakeholders that they all really need to agree on which version of the software that they're going to use to avoid a split. And that's what we see right now. What we see right now, returning to CoinDance here, is that Bitcoin SV, which is Craig Wright's camp, its SV is like Satoshi's vision. So Bitcoin SV, if we look down here, clearly, from a support point of view, it has clearly the most support from miners, while Bitcoin ABC and Bitcoin Unlimited clearly have the most support from nodes and companies. Now, I don't want to get lost in the weeds here because this stuff can get very technical. I don't mind going there, but that's very time consuming, and it's also not my intention for today's video. One thing I will point out though is that the multiple versions of Bitcoin software, that doesn't necessarily mean a split if the various versions are compatible. You know what I mean? So Ethereum is a great example of this. It's a great example of a blockchain that has multiple implementations of the client software that all work together. So there's Ethereum core wallet, there's Mist, there's the Geth wallet, there's, or not wallet, but implementation of the core node software. Parity is another one. So these are all node softwares which all work together. And actually, they all work on the Ethereum mainnet. That's no small feat. And the developers actually have to collaborate to ensure that no one implementation is going to fork the network in in a in its own direction, which sometimes happens on the Ethereum testnet, which is why they test it to make sure before they hard fork to Constantinople or anything like this that all of the implementations that are used in the community are going to continue to work together. So, point being, just because you have multiple implementations doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to go in their own direction, right? In the case of Bitcoin Cash, though, there are some fundamental differences in the way that the developers of, say, the Bitcoin SV client, the way they want the network rules to be, versus the rules that the Bitcoin ABC client want them to be. That means they're not compatible, and hence there is the risk of a split in 2 days' time on the 15th. Right now, I'm thinking the Bitcoin Cash was already kind of David to Bitcoin's Goliath. And this split situation could well relegate Bitcoin Cash to obscurity. It was doing well, because it inherited the coin supply from Bitcoin. It's maintained a reasonable price. It's maintained itself in like the top 5 as a crypto. But I'm just thinking, I honestly think that this might push it right into obscurity. So I'll say no more about that for now. Next story. You may have heard that the bear market has removed a lot of distractions, which has allowed the developers to get down to work. Well, this next story is evidence of that. It comes from Dash Force News. Dash 0.13 update hits the testnet, historic release imminent. Now, the long-awaited transformation of the Dash network is known as evolution, and that's the historic release I think they're talking about in the headline. Now, the article is reporting on this most recent update to the Dash network, which is due to be followed by a version of Dash which will be a significant step closer to the vision of Dash being an everyday cryptocurrency. So Dash knows what it is, digital cash. That's what they're going for. Now, once evolution is released, Dash users will have these human-readable account names, kind of like in BitShares or in Steam or whatever, instead of those long cryptographic addresses. Now, those long cryptographic addresses and all the cryptography will still be there, but just like when we use the internet, all that complexity will be hidden from the user. So I've been monitoring the progress of Dash evolution for like the last 2 years, which since it was announced actually. So I'm glad to see that we're almost there. We're almost there. And just as a way of disclosure, yes, I own some Dash. Next story. On last week's live stream, some of you were asking for a status update on Worbli, creating your account, getting your share drop, and so on. Here it is. This comes from Worbli's own Medium blog, so it's right from the horse's mouth. So the new dates for the web portal launch is the 21st of November, which is when you'll be able to create your account and claim your airdrop. And then if you claim your, if you open your account within the first 9 days, you get a bonus of 10% on the share drop. But in order to create a Worbli account, you have to verify your identity. That's going to be a network-wide rule, right? Because Worbli is going to be specializing in these fintech kind of apps, having your identity verified for your custom and anti-money laundering regulations and so on, is an absolute must. So this verification of your identity thing, that's going to be required for you to use the Worbli network at all. So it's not just for the share drop, it's not just for creating your account in this instance. Even if you create your account later, in order to use the Worbli network, you're going to have to verify your identity, all right? Because that's just the way it works. Now, given that, I believe that requirement that all Worbli accounts must be attached to an identity, that's going to be key to the network taking off like a rocket. Because once you have the ability to identify unique individuals on a blockchain, so much stuff becomes possible that isn't possible without it, right? This isn't going to be popular with decentralization purists or, cypherpunk types and so on. But in order for us to do the big things we want to do with blockchain, you got to have that identity piece. And Worbli, I think Worbli understand this. And it's going to allow them to do things that no other blockchain is going to be able to do. Like, a lot of people ask me about universal basic income. I'm not saying that they don't have any plans to do that. I'm just saying that kind of thing absolutely relies on you having the ability to identify unique individuals to avoid, one person getting two lots of universal basic income. That's just one example of why identity is absolutely key when it comes to all this fintech and finance stuff. So on the 21st, that will be when we can create our accounts on Worbli and get our share drop. And then 7 days later, on the 28th, there'll be a wallet and the ability to send and receive tokens. No word on an exchange listing yet, but stay tuned for that. Next story. Japan's biggest bank is going to use Ripple for cross-border payments all the way to the other side of the world, to Brazil. So bitcoinist.com provides us with this article. Japan's biggest bank will use Ripple for cross-border payments to Brazil. So this is Mitsubishi UFG Financial Group. That's Japan's largest banking group, apparently. And they've signed this memorandum of understanding with Sao Paulo's Banco Bradesco. That's the bank on the other end. Now, once this is implemented, we're talking near instant transfers between these two countries, facilitated by these two banks. So in those countries, if you want to do a bank transfer, from Japan to Brazil, well, you're going to have to go to one of these providers, right? Because they're going to be the only ones offering this service in the first instance. So brilliant. They're first to market with it. And then, of course, if it becomes profitable, other banks in the country will jump on the bandwagon because there's money to be made. That's just the way it works. Now, while this is good news for Ripple, it doesn't necessarily mean anything for the XRP token. So it seems to me that people like Jed McCaleb, who founded Ripple, have become billionaires off the back of a misunderstanding. So every time there is some good news about Ripple, that potentially boosts the price of the XRP token. The problem is that the adoption and use of the Ripple network, RippleNet, may not include the use of the XRP token, meaning the news has absolutely nothing to do with the XRP token. Now, because of this misunderstanding, retail investors have historically bought XRP on the markets when they hear these news stories, which means it pushes the prices up. And that means, like, by January of 2018, Jed McCaleb's net worth, thanks to his holdings of XRP, reached $20 billion. So these kinds of nuances that XRP isn't necessary to use the Ripple network, these are nuances that are a function of the complexity in the crypto space. So that just makes me think that it's increasingly important to invest based on principles more than anything else. Since there's no way for one person to absorb all the minute details of, say, a 50 coin portfolio. There's no way to, have absolute knowledge of all 50 cryptos that you're invested in. So you can't invest on that basis of having absolute knowledge of everything. At the most fundamental level, Ripple is very well organized, right? There is a company behind it, a for-profit company that's driving it and doing all the sales and marketing and the schmoozing and all the rest of it. And they're getting down to business. Meanwhile, unfortunately, the likes of the Bitcoin Cash community are dicking about with the civil war. So if Ripple ends up getting adoption and Bitcoin Cash doesn't, these will be the reasons why. On to the next story. EOS reverses a previously confirmed transaction as pundits decry centralization. That is the exact headline that comes from the Cointelegraph as of yesterday's article. Now, News BTC wrote an article about this a few days ago, actually, which prompted me to write somewhat of a correction in a blog post. I did this on Steam, so here it is. I just want to read you a quick extract from this. So I wrote, I understand how this kind of thing happens because it sometimes happens to me. As media outlets, it's impossible for us to have 100% knowledge of all the subjects we cover. Because of this, sooner or later we are going to gloss over something which ends up making our content look like an intentional misrepresentation or a hit piece. This happened to me recently. Just read the comments on this video where I mentioned Elastos. I don't think News BTC wrote this article because they are biased. I just think they are under the pressure created between the demands for producing content on a regular basis and the limitations on the amount of research that can go into each piece. If we media outlets are held to the standard of absolute perfection, putting a month's research into each thing we produce content on, we would go out of business fast, ultimately depriving the community at large. Yes, I would love to be able to release full-length documentaries and make sure to include every single nuance about a topic I cover, but this is simply not a model that can be sustained without enormous resources. This is how I came to write the mission statement for the Cryptoverse, which you can read here, and then I link to the Patreon page. It's also why I set up a Patreon page in the first place, as I saw it's the only way that this thing is going to work. So, that's the extract from my article. Now, back to the Cointelegraph article. It says here, I've actually highlighted a bit here, it says, appearing to show a moderator, so they're talking about, there's a screenshot going around social media appearing to show a moderator reversing transactions which had already been confirmed. Now this immediately tells me that the author doesn't understand the subject that they are writing about, because arbitrators in EOS do not have any powers of enforcement, because power in the EOS ecosystem is decentralized. We just went through the Bitcoin Cash one, where you've got the three parties, where the power is decentralized. Similar thing goes in EOS, but the model's slightly different. So in EOS, users enlist the services of arbitrators, kind of like if you would hire a private investigator. So they look into the case and they write up a report based on their findings. That's it. They just write and publish a report. That's it. In this case, the arbitrator found that there was a theft of someone's personal property. It's then up to the 21 block producers to review those findings, and only if they come to consensus will they then return the stolen property. It is not automatic. It also does not break immutability, as many people have been claiming, since transactions are not reversed, right? They're not deleted. The original transaction, where the funds were moved from the rightful owner's wallet to the thief's wallet, that will remain on the blockchain in the historical list of transactions. It's totally immutable for all time, can't be changed. Excuse me. If the block producers do decide to enact the rule of law and then return the stolen property to the rightful owner, a new transaction will be issued on the EOS blockchain with an up-to-date timestamp of whenever that happens, showing the transfer of the property from the thief's wallet back to the rightful owner's wallet. So I honestly don't understand why anyone has a problem with this, especially since these networks are all based on complete and utter voluntary participation. Let me say that again. All of these networks are based on complete and utter voluntary participation. I have to ask whether these critics prefer what's known as the law of the jungle model, where there is zero flexibility in the system. That's like if you send your crypto to the wrong address, if you send it into oblivion, or if you forget your password or your private key, hard luck, you lose all your money. Whether you've got $5, $1 million, or $5 billion. It's just the way it is. So it's a very, very hard line. That's the law of the jungle. Anything goes. If you're advocating for law of the jungle, then you have to take a story like this. This is from the Register. This was widely reported at the time, but it's from November of last year. The parity calamity. Wallet bug destroys $280 million in Ethereum. When a punter accidentally bulks dozens of strangers' cryptocurrency collections. I covered this at the time. There was a function in a smart contract which some amateur programmer called the destroy function, which actually removed the ability for anyone to withdraw Ethereum from this parity multi-signature smart contract. So that meant, even to this day, as far as I know, all of that, at the time it was about the same, $280 million of Ethereum is stuck in that smart contract with no way to remove it because the smart contract is now deaf. It doesn't respond to withdraw transactions. So that's law of the jungle. One error, boom, 280 million gone. So if you're advocating for law of the jungle, you have to take an article like that. And then you have to imagine what happens when a new user or a new developer or a new business reads that article. Then you have to imagine that they read an article like the Cointelegraph article, where they read that a user on the EOS network had their funds stolen. They took the matter to arbitration, and then the rule of law was enforced and they got their money back. Right? Just imagine the experience of that user where they read Law of the Jungle on Ethereum, they read that there's this flexibility in this arbitration mechanism on EOS. Which network do you think they're going to be more comfortable using? Again, this has got nothing to do with whether you're a decentralization purist or anything like that. I'm not talking about you, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the masses, right? If everyone in the world were just like me, I personally would prefer Law of the Jungle. That's my personally preferred model because I'm technical, I'm very diligent, I'm very detail oriented, and I don't make those kinds of mistakes. I've never sent crypto to the wrong wallet. I've never been hacked, right? So that's not a good standard though, because I'm technically oriented. I've got a computer science degree and all the rest of it. So of course I would prefer the Law of the Jungle. However, I'm also wise enough to know that if we insist on the Law of the Jungle model, mass adoption will just remain a pipe dream, given the unforgiving nature of the technology is just going to put the vast majority of people off ever using it. And I want people to use it, which is why I have to surrender my personally preferred model, Law of the Jungle, for the one that's actually going to be appealing to the masses. This is why EOS is one of my top crypto holdings, not because I love it, because I believe the market will love it, which to me is a much smarter way to decide what to invest in. But that's all I've got for you today. So if you liked this episode, go ahead and hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Please leave me a comment below with some feedback, and I would very much appreciate it if you would get subscribed. Also, check out my online store where you'll find a range of products that bear the Cryptoverse branding. I appreciate you buying stuff in the online store because your purchase helps to keep this channel going. Other than that, I'll be back with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. Until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.